Over these last days, we've been endeavoring to come to understand and or to reconcile a sublime paradox. And that sublime paradox is of having arrived and yet perpetually becoming. So there are several more ingredients to add to our pot, and let's see what they cook up for us to bring this about. The first is an old story told long ago. The second is a personal anecdote that was brought to recollection when speaking to Alex a few days ago. But the first story is about that great spiritual master who had a large following, who had been with him for many years. But one day, one of these followers said to the master, "Master, we know you have great power and the ability to be able to touch and bring about the state of enlightenment. We have been with you for many, many years. Why have you not touched us and brought us to instant enlightenment?" The master said, "Let me tell you a story. There was a man who had 2 cooking pots, both of them that he'd used for many, many years, and both of them were heavily encrusted with the grime and carbon of having been used for those many years. So one day he decided to take those pots to someone to be cleaned. So he took his first pot to someone who had a great forge. He was a man who made horseshoes and all that kind of thing, so he had a great furnace. And he said to the man, "Yes, leave this pot with me and come back in 24 hours. I'll have it as good as new for you." And the second pot he took to a man who painstakingly transformed metal objects. And the second man said, "It's going to take me some while. This pot is heavily encrusted, but leave it with me. It'll take about a month or so." So, after 24 hours, the man went to the first man who had the furnace, and there was his pot. It was shining and pristine. There was not a sign of the incrustations that had adhered to it before. But when he took it home and put it on his cooking fire, the pot disintegrated before his eyes. Now, after a month, he went to the second man, and there was his pot. It was not as good as new. It still had the signs of age, but it was cleaned. There were no more incrustations or grime attached to it. And when he brought it home, it became a utensil that he was able to use for the rest of his life. So the master said to his followers, "You see, if I threw you into the full fire of my love, it would bring you to purification, but it would be too powerful for you. You would then be of no use to mankind. But now bit by bit, as the grime and incrustations have been removed, you are now able to become those utensils, those beings who will serve mankind for the rest of your lives. The second personal story is a story of an experience I had with Divine Mother. Now, most know that the Divine Mother that I spent those years with was of Japanese heritage. Her background was one of Shintoism, so she had many, many followers who had come from this same heritage. And one amongst those was a woman who had been with her for many, many years, but whose husband had never had any time for Divine Mother. He didn't openly try to bring her down, but he only tolerated his wife's devotion to her. But this husband was found to have cancer. And after this was discovered, he immediately called on the Shinto priests to come. And they came and chanted and did what Shinto priests do. But very soon, Walter, and that was his name, discarded this. But his disease progressed. He was under heavy treatment. But then he called the Christian pastor, and he had this pastor visit him for some time. But after some time, Walter also found that this was not of any assistance to him. And after this, he came to the time where he begged his wife to ask Divine Mother to come and visit him. And so I had the very great experience of being Divine Mother's driver when she went to visit Walter. Now, when we went to their house, she sat with him. Sometimes they would whisper to one another, but mostly, from my observation, she merely sat with him, perhaps touching him in some way now and again. But each time we visited, there was a clear change in Walter. But he deteriorated to the state where he could no longer bear even to have the lightest of cloth over his suffering body. But one day he clearly said to Divine Mother, "There's a little boy. He's on the hill, and he's so ragged, and he's so dirty. We have to clean him up. Will you help me?" And to my observation, Divine Mother merely nodded to him and touched him once again. After this, there came a time, and several visits later, where Walter said to his wife, "Please call Divine Mother to come." And he insisted that he be bathed and be dressed in his best pajamas. So this his wife did. When we arrived at their house, and I walked into that room, the light in that room was so bright, the tears began to roll down my cheeks. because I realized that this being was so pure that it would not be possible for such a state of purity to sustain a physical body. And in witnessing, when Divine Mother went over to stand beside Walter's bed, he sat up and he gripped her on the shoulders. She was just a tiny little being, and even though he was so skeletal, the grip that he clasped her with was so tight, but it was evident in watching that he was attempting to climb inside her. She said to him, "I'm your real mother." They're the only words I heard her say. And with that, Walter gave a deep sigh, let her go, and lay down. We left after that, and 2 hours later, Walter died. This sublime paradox, to have arrived and be perpetually becoming. These two stories are about purification. What relevance, from your experience, can you derive from the recognition of the process of purification and having arrived and perpetually becoming? What is it that arises out of these stories for us in our endeavor to come to understand and or reconcile, having arrived and perpetually becoming? How does the process of purification relate to this?
I think you just got from the source and go away and slowly come back. And so the source is always there. And so it is, the becoming is just coming home, and so it's always there. We're just not aware of it.
Okay.
For me, it's a process of letting go of ego.
Mm-hmm.
And like more and more letting go, and one layer and second layer, third layer, and really till become completely pure.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Well, I can put it kind of on a material, human level, how I see it. And one is that, you know, what you were saying on Tuesday, that we don't run down the road screaming and wailing and crying anymore. We handle that. And if we look at how our attachments were to material things, now we haven't got that attachment attachment to material things. But now I feel, for me, that I have attachments for like nature or an inner, and can't really describe it, but like an inner peace, that I have an attachment that, I don't know if it's an attachment, but nothing gives me more pleasure now than those kind of things where before, where we're wailing and screaming, it's, what are we then? We're becoming, but what were we before?
Yes, right.
Yeah. That's how I can see it in my life.
So do you see that as a reconciliation between this state of peace and being here as that is,
Yeah.
to the unfolding of life?
And then each time something else will come up, and then you realise, or I realise, and we'll all realise that we're not affected by that anymore,
Mm-hmm.
but something else will come
Mm-hmm.
on some other experience, and that will give us such a thrill, but it's nothing material
Mm-hmm.
that we can go, oh God, I got a new washing machine.
Mm.
That different experience.
Experience.
So if we're not filling the gap with demonstrating more about us doing
Uh-huh.
we put in it, we can fill it with the mind, the essence of life.
And there was a very interesting question that arose last week when this was brought up. Why do we need to know this? Why do we need to know that we've arrived?
I understand. So most spiritually you could say things, they need to be anchored into this vibration, because it's a vibration, it's not a real tree that's actually a vibration. And when we anchor our life or the vibration that we are, it becomes part of everything.
Yes.
Everything. It's not just going to
Yes.
Because,
hold it here and anchor it.
Mm-hmm.
because we have to know it, or else how are we going to move, to do anything else?
Mm-hmm.
We'd have to know it and acknowledge it and claim it, and then keep,
Absolutely so. Mm-hmm. All right. Well,